No, I'm going to grab myself a glass of water too. I'll be right back.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. And we're live tonight on episode 14 of the SoNo show. I'm your host, Southern Nordic. And while he isn't present right this second, my guest is an extremely intelligent young man by the name of Charles Robertson. Some of you may know him as the PowerPoint guy, as he describes himself on his Gab account. If any of you remember, when was it, Charles, that your great replacement demonstration, your presentation that you did for your college class, when was that exactly that it went viral?
That was November of 2019, so a few years ago now. It
Yeah.
feels like only a few months ago, but that's because COVID really destroyed my entire perception of time.
Yes, I can understand. I remember watching that video right when it went viral. It would have been that sounds about right. Back in November or December of 2019. I remember watching that and I was like, wow, it kind of gave me hope. I've kind of been of the opinion the last decade or so that college is just an utterly pointless endeavor for our young men. But whenever I seen you do that presentation, how well it went over, how good you are at public speaking, it gave me a glimmer of hope, you could say. Absolutely. And then I had forgotten about your channel up until Apollonian Germ had referenced your channel and recommended it to us in one of his streams I'd say about 6 or 7 weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that guy. Who's that?
Oh, Apollonian Germ, I believe you would absolutely enjoy his channel. Like you, he has a degree in philosophy from, I believe, the University of Illinois in Chicago. You should check his channel out.
I haven't gotten my degree yet. I put COVID on, or COVID caused me to put university on pause. I don't have far left to get my BA, but I don't want to go back into college until after the vax mandate stuff is resolved, at which point I'm going to charge right back in there. Because, guys, I think that the college is a wasted endeavor for our people. I think that that's a massive psyop. Okay?
I can see that.
To college. Don't go to private universities. You'll get expelled in like a week and a half. Okay? Go to state schools. Go to like state-funded public universities. They can't kick you out because of your political opinion. Go to college for a number of reasons. Reason number one, making your communist professor look stupid in front of the entire class is the most fun you'll ever have, I promise. Secondly, these people are so like echo chambered in their ivory tower that they are not prepared for any of our sincere arguments or positions. They believe that their straw men of our arguments are in fact our legitimate arguments. So when you go in there
Sorry about that. I had an echo come on. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, you're good. But like when you go in there with like actual cohesive, well-sourced arguments, they are simply not only are they incapable of responding rhetorically, they're incapable of responding emotionally. They freeze like a deer in headlights. They don't know what to do. And every class has a group chat. Some student in the class will form a group chat so that they can all compare notes and cheat off each other's homework. And once you're in that group chat, you now have an avenue to be like, hey, our anthropology professor said something that was just straight up not true. And here's a list of academic sources. And there's all kinds of useful tools that they give you that you wouldn't think of until you became a college student, like having access to academic search engines and being able to just automatically bypass paywalls when it comes to certain types of research. It's go to college. Best part, if you're still not convinced, okay, go to college, major in philosophy. When you major in philosophy, you get to take whatever class you want. all right? Because
Yes.
philosophy is an umbrella that applies to everything. It's also in the social sciences category. And in the social sciences, 75% of the students are female. Okay? 75% of the students are female. The 25% of students that are male are absolute freaking soy boys. So if you just have like a thimbleful of masculine confidence and the ability to form coherent sentences, there's going to be at least one chick in every class who has a crush on you, right?
There you go.
Go to college.
There
Go
you
to
go.
college. Um, and you're going to learn things that you'll hear me say this, but you won't really understand it until you have an experience of it. And that is that in most cases, when it comes to the subject of like racial consciousness, talking to Black and Hispanic students is a lot easier than talking to the white students. And once you've got a Black chick and a Hispanic dude in your corner when it comes to the class debates, bullying the other white students into submission becomes a lot easier, like crazy easy, because they start accusing you of being racist. And then this Black chick comes out of nowhere and absolutely has your back. And now they're stuck and don't know what to do. It,
Man, that's a very good point. What you bring up about our people avoiding college, staying out of it.
yeah.
Um, I went to East
Is
Tennessee
it,
State
oh
University.
yeah?
I got a degree in banking and finance, of all things. I finished. Yeah, it's the irony is really shocking to me. Um, I graduated back in 2011, and I would say that at least in that part, East Tennessee State, it's in the northeast corner of Tennessee, Johnson City, but largely a white area. There's some diversity on campus. I would say that at least in my courses, my business courses and everything, we didn't have to deal with a lot of the woke stuff that you see that I would imagine is very prominent in your field, for example. But I've never used my degree. I've always worked in trades. College was just an absolute waste for me. I have to admit, I was a terrible college student. I would do just enough to make a C plus so I could advance. I was much more interested in partying, all the typical nonsense,
The
chasing
social
women.
connect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much. It was I wish a lot of times I would have went for something that personally, at least for myself, would have been much more worthwhile. I found the business courses and everything to be particularly soul sucking, I guess you could say. I mean, it's just a lot of the people I was in class with, they're just so vapid, you could say. Just so. Anyway, what was you going to say?
Yeah, no, I could see that. But like going to college now, they've reduced the standards so much to accommodate for the diversity and make it like passable for them that there was one semester where I didn't buy any of my textbooks. And it wasn't because I didn't have the money to do it or anything like that. It was because I just wanted to add the challenge of not having any textbooks for any classes. Still made the dean's list.
Man, that's
Um,
awesome. That's awesome.
in my religious studies class after the midterm, there was this hilarious moment where the professor came in and he said, "We have a problem." And he pointed at me and he pointed at the atheist girl that I would always argue with every single class. And he said, "Those two are the only ones who actually pass the midterm." See, I grade on a curve and they both got A's. And I had to remove them from the curve because if I didn't, the whole rest of the class failed. But I'm not allowed to exclude them from the curve when it comes to the final. So
Yeah.
y'all are going to have to figure something out. And towards the end of the semester when we were getting ready for finals, my classmates would come up to me and say, "You have to get things wrong on the final. You have to." And I'm just like, guys, the fact that you think this is hard means that you should not be here.
Yeah.
It was So the standards are ridiculously low. It's super easy to pass. It's super easy to pass with minimal effort, guys.
Yeah, I mean that's how I got through college. I mean, I just did the minimal effort just to pass. I was not concerned with any uh, any grades per se. I just wanted to get it over with.
Oh,
But that's really awesome how it worked out
yeah.
for you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that's awesome how it worked out for you. You faced a lot of heat when you were in college as well. Also from that
Yeah.
stream, I would imagine.
Well, it all just kind of blew by me. Like after I did my presentation, there was a Hispanic Students Union protest where they like walked out. I did not know that that even happened until like 2 weeks afterwards.
Wow.
And so like there was heat, but it all just kind of wafted past me like a breeze. It meant nothing to me really. Had no
Yeah.
real effect. Didn't stop me from taking any classes. They a lot of professors did add a caveat to their syllabus that you're not allowed to make any recordings or share anything on social media without permission from your professor. But that didn't matter because I had already had permission from
Yeah.
my professor to make that video. So, like, yeah, guys, I'm telling if your IQ is above 100, just above 100, if you're just in any capacity above average, go to college, do it. And it's like,
That's
well, I don't want to rack up all that debt. And it's just like, yeah, the student loan debt is inescapable. Like declaring bankruptcy doesn't get rid of it. But like you can pay those bills with a credit card.
true. And then you can renege on the. You got to get creative. You got to get creative. Absolutely.
Like, but yeah, like lately here, like with COVID, and I'm not taking their vaccine. Like I don't care what they say.
Yeah.
I don't care what they threaten me with. I'm not doing. And because of that, I'm not in college right now until I know that that's not going to be an issue. I just not doing it. In the
Yeah.
meantime, I've been trying to come up with like other things to do, other projects to work on. Like how do you get the word out? And something that I've been looking at lately is we're way too shut in to our own little world, and it's becoming a problem in two ways. The first way that it's a problem is that it's making it so we're developing these jargons and these inside jokes and this like little our subculture is becoming so closed off that it's making it very difficult for us to have conversations with normal people. And I've been trying to encourage people to just consume more normie tier content.
That was your last video, actually. How we
Yeah.
missed the perfect opportunity to red pill a lot of people due to the Big Brother. How all the black, how
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned. I'll let you explain it, but
All right. Yeah. So what happened with Big Brother specifically? Big Brother was catching a lot of heat on social media because they had never had a black winner.
yes,
And so they, in season 23 of the show, they made like almost half the house black. They had six black people who immediately on day one formed a secret alliance to purge all non-blacks from the house, which makes sense. Like if I were them, I would have done the same thing, like
yeah,
obviously. The clever strategy that clearly worked. And the fact that it worked so well I think was a bit of an eye opener. It was certainly an eye opener for. I have like very normie tier family members that are like frustratingly normie tier, but that was an eye opener for them. And I I've never watched an episode of Big Brother. I had never seen a single episode. I
I
had
haven't
never
either.
any interest at all. She told me about this event, and I was like, okay, I need to watch this show. And now I think I've watched like 6 seasons of it. It is the sickest, most twisted. It has an outright solvent effect on your sanity. Have scotch like at the ready if you're going to watch this show. But
For sure.
it's a fascinating like anthropological study of people. Like, don't watch it like, oh, I love the drama. No, watch it with like a pen and paper, like you're doing a psychological analysis of how these people are interacting, because it gives you a lot of weird insights that are hard to describe on like where people are at emotionally. It's like it's almost like a litmus test for where the country is at, because these are extremely normie tier people who don't consume news. They're not into conspiracy theories. It shows you this is a normie. This is how normies talk to each other. This is how you can approach a normie. And you'll hear them talk and you'll think in your head, hey, what they're talking about right here, I know exactly how I could have segued that into a conversation about history and then moved that into a conversation about the USS Liberty incident. Like,
Yes. You could. There's.
talking to normal people in real life is what we need to be doing more of. And you can get insight into that from watching these stupid, stupid shows. I'm not denying that these are hard to watch. This is why God invented alcohol. All right. But it's there for us. And when it comes to like approaching people in real life, oh, this boomer lady gave me this at my work the other day. Have you ever seen these they're called chick tracts. It's these
No.
little it's a little Christian propaganda comic.
Really?
All right.
I've seen.
Like, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's these tiny little Christian propaganda comics. This is how like they distributed like Protestant Christianity got its message to a lot of like third world countries and
Yes.
actually across America. Like you'll occasionally find them. What this is basically just a sheet of paper. They printed it on they printed the images front and back. They cut the paper into 3 strips, stacked them on top of each other, bound it with a single staple,
Wow.
and folded it over. All right. It's super cheap, super easy. And I'm actually like looking into printer services now. And I might just have to bite the bullet and actually buy a printer instead of trying to employ a printer service. But I'm looking into it cost wise right now, because if we could make something like this and just fill it with Stone Toss comics and memes and FBI crime stats and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and just leave them on coffee shop tables, leave them on a shelf in the grocery store, just little Easter eggs for people to find. If a normie finds it, they'll pick it up. They'll go, ha ha, funny comic. Oh, shocking fact. Ha ha, funny comic. Oh, shocking fact.
Yeah.
If one of our left wing, adversaries finds it, they're gonna snap a picture of it and post it to Instagram or whatever stupid thing they're on, and stir up a big scare about evil neon Yahtzees using comics. Like, I just think that would be a really interesting take the meme war IRL. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can understand
Because
that. Yeah. That's interesting
and
about those little pamphlets. I'd never seen one particularly like what you just showed me. I've seen some of the small ones that, like the guys riding around the neighborhood on their bicycles, they'll leave them at your doorstep or
oh yeah,
something. But I've never seen the actual comic. Like you said, it's called a chick book.
Chick, yeah, it's made by Chick Publications out of Ontario, California,
Hmm.
and they have a website, chick.com, where you can go if you're outside the United States and you want to get some of these. They're they're so they're so cheaply made, but the comic is actually like not poorly written.
Yeah, it
Uh,
looks fairly good.
yeah, but like
But
the
fill it
material is cheap. It's all about the content.
fill it up with stone toss, like you said.
Yeah,
That's a
and
pretty good idea.
this is something that if you were a dedicated individual, you could probably do this with like home computer and home printer. And
Yeah.
that's something else, is that I've noticed that when it comes to propagandizing, and propaganda has like a weird stigma attached to the word. Propaganda is just content with a message, which all content is some form of propaganda, unless it's like
Yes.
completely vacuous idiocy. All content is a form of, like, Marvel movies are a form of propaganda.
Yes.
Uh, so the problem that we've had is that we have these like groups that crop up, and I've joined a few of them. Like I was in IE, I was in AIM, and we need more guerrilla style tactics when it comes to propagandizing.
Yes.
Like stop like I like what Patriot Front is doing. Don't get me wrong, but stop putting up flyers that say join Patriot. Stop doing that. Stop putting up flyers that say it's okay to be white. Like just stop doing that. Like I get it. Posting it's okay to be white gets a rise out of left wingers who will freak out about it on social media. But less than 2% of Americans are on Twitter. Like we've got this illusion that social media is like where everybody is, and that's not the case.
Oh yeah.
People are in real life, okay? And if you just take that super edgy infographic meme that you have in your folder that has like the FBI crime stats and then some sarcastic comment that's really funny but also really edgy, print that off, post that at a bus stop, that's going to cause much more of a stir than just posting it's okay to be white. Because the people who see it are going to learn something they didn't know.
Yes. You're going to
Bonus
present them.
points.
Yeah, you're going to present them with
Points if you
facts.
embed like a QR code.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like if you can embed like a QR code to link them directly to the FBI.gov website so they can see it for themselves, you get freaking bonus points. Like,
yeah. They can't deny that.
Yeah. And sorry for just rambling on. I told you it's hard to make me shut up.
Oh no, you're fine, Charles. No worries at all. Like I said, I enjoy listening. I would like to ask you some more questions about what your opinions are on some of these public forward-facing groups, like you just mentioned, like Patriot Front. I was going to ask you that a little bit later in the show. I figured we'd go back to your past right now. What led you, you could say, on this path? What showed you? What made you racially aware, I guess you could say? I know it's a generic question that a lot of people ask, but I'm curious to hear it.
Well, I guess the most obvious answer would be living near black people.
Ooh.
But if you wanted to, like, I think it all started in fifth grade. Because in fifth grade, all right, so I grew up in rural nowhere, Missouri, up until I was about 8 years old. And then my mom and my little brother and we moved to Brunswick, Georgia, and I started going to public school. Because before that, I was like going to a K through 12 school with less than 100 students in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. And then I started going to public school and I started interacting with people of other races. And in fifth grade, we started learning about World War II. And the teacher said that each of us had to write a paper, not a book report, but a paper about a famous person from World War II. And I called dibs on Hitler.
Yeah.
Like I called dibs on him. Right. And she said that it was too big of a topic for one student. So she said I could have the early life, and she assigned the later life to my first black friend ever. He was a young boy named Brandon. And so I went to the library and I got some books. Amongst them was his book. And I was freaking 10 years old, so I barely understood anything that I was reading. And I was just trying to like put together the narrative of his early life. And I learned about how his dad was like a super, like, just
extremely strict.
Yeah, very strict.
A real prick. A real prick.
Yeah, a real prick. Abusive by our standards. Back then, I think it was he was kind of edgy even by the standards of his day, but I don't think they would have considered it abusive back then. I learned about his relationship with his mom. I learned about how he was like a freaking hero in World War I. And that's where like my paper ended, but that's not where my curiosity ended. And that is where I first started tumbling down the rabbit hole. And I was really good at math. And so when we started reading the Diary of Anne Frank and we started talking about that stuff, me being good at math became a little bit of a problem. And then, middle school rolled through and puberty happened. And I just started noticing this pattern of everybody freaking hates us. Like, everything's all about how, like, all of your problems are white people's fault. The end. And I also noticed how like certain groups could do things and get away with it, and white students could not get away with it nearly as easily. And there was at one point I got into a fight, and the other kid got out of trouble completely by simply saying that I had called them the N word when I had
Yes.
done no such thing. And I got all of the trouble, and they did not. And I was just
That's
like, huh, like,
that's a real learning experience right there, I would imagine. That's when
yeah.
it really drives it home. I meant to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, you mentioned it was Brunswick, Georgia.
Yeah.
Is this where the Ahmaud Arbery
Yeah.
shooting happened? Okay, I thought
Yeah.
it sounded
I,
familiar.
I actually, like, as a kid, have had ridden my bike down that street many a time. Like,
Wow.
I've been there. So like when that
Wow.
happened, I was just like, hey, I know this place. I've been there. Um,
Yes.
and as you watch that whole trial unfold, and they recently were found guilty of a hate crime, like, and no,
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 not at all.
like
Not at all.
I, as somebody who lived in Brunswick for a long time, and like I know the area, I know the people. If you're breaking into houses and stealing stuff, they don't really care what race you are. They're going to chase you down and shoot you for that.
And I mean,
They
that's how
don't.
it should be. That's really how it should be.
Yeah,
I think
I
vigilante
mean,
justice is the most effective kind of justice, honestly, because
well, I wouldn't say it's the most effective form of justice, but I would definitely say it's the most effective form of deterrence.
yes,
All right, because
good
like,
point. Good point.
yeah, criminals don't fear the law, but they
They fear
do
other
fear
criminals.
right. And when you have the very real threat of the person that you're robbing might kill you or might do you serious harm, you're not going to rob them. You're going to go for easy targets. Predators go for
Yes.
easy targets. The lions always catch the slowest zebra. All right, like
Yes.
that's
Uh,
how it goes. But
unf-
if the zebras had the Second Amendment, lions wouldn't chase.
yeah. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, I do know a few things about this. I mean, I've been to jail before. I was a criminal in my younger days. I was a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know a
Mm-hmm.
few things. I know what you're talking about here. I mean, unfortunately, I was a thief. I would hijack things, and I would, like you said, I would always case a place out, pick the easy target. Unfortunately, yeah, that's a whole different story. But that's kind of me getting into drugs whenever I got out of college. That
Mm-hmm.
that kind of started to change my views. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about my journey, I guess you could say. I grew up in the northeast corner of Tennessee, an extremely rural part of Appalachia. Um, the county that I'm from is, I believe, 98.7% white. The town that I'm from, you can't even call it a town, but it's a village more or less. There's not a single stoplight in the town that I'm from,
Nice.
and it's all white. But you know, I learned that seeing the drug epidemic take hold. I mean, you wouldn't imagine that there would be any drugs or any real crime in this little area. I mean, it's up nestled high in the southern Appalachians. It's a very beautiful place. It's a really poor place too, though. There's not a lot of opportunity there. Like I said, I think I told you earlier, I live about 3.5 hours away from where I'm from, where my family is back home. And Bersin says, sounds like heaven minus the opiates. And yeah, I would add methamphetamine there too. But, whenever I moved down here to Southeast Tennessee about just a little over 3 years ago, turned my life around and everything. But, looking back on it, that had a huge impact on me, seeing how this white area in the middle of nowhere, there's so many drug addled young people walking around, robbing places. It's just absolute chaos, and it's a tragedy. And then I learned about 3 years ago when I started going down the rabbit hole much further, I learned about the Sackler family and Purdue Pharmacy and the Oxycontin. Back when I was in college, I had cousins who would travel down to Florida. They would bring back, I'd send them with a few $100s. They would bring back, hundreds of Roxy or their oxycodone 30 milligram pills. They'd bring back hundreds, enough to kill an elephant with. And I mean, there was lots of people doing this. And, that's one thing that there was a few other things too. Back in 2016, a couple of years before I moved down here, my dad showed me a certain documentary by Dennis Wise, The Greatest Story Never Told. You were smart. You picked up on this a lot younger, but I remember I was always greatly interested in history growing up as a child. My great-grandfather I was really close to as a child. He was in World War II, although he was in the Pacific Theater. And so I was always interested in World War II. And I always, like you, I kind of had questions. As a kid, I always kind of pulled for the villains, the bad guys in the movie. And I was like, wow, the Austrian artist, he's like the greatest bad guy ever. So, I noticed I was like, and then I remember when I was about 10, Dad had me read the book Animal Farm. And he also told me, that Karl Marx was Jewish. And this kind of didn't understand. I didn't understand this. I was raised conservative. My parents voted for Republican on the ticket. Yeah. And I was always under the impression, I'm like, wow, the Jews are they're always just innocent, And what the fuck is Karl Marx doing inventing communism? And he's Jewish, it all came, it was just a process, I guess you could say.
The pieces started falling together, yeah. Interestingly enough, I have a kind of similar backstory. Like I fell pretty hard into drugs. For me, it wasn't Oxycontin, it was hydrocodone. I got hooked on that one. Yeah, I got hooked on that stuff when I was like right before I got kicked out of high school. Yeah, I got kicked out of high school for
shit.
I was always ditching class and going to the library because I actually wanted to learn things. And then I would take those things that I learned and I would print them out on flyers and I would distribute them around the school. And I hung out with a rowdy group of guys who we liked to shave our heads and we waved at each other in a weird way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so at one point I got put in a mental hospital for 2 weeks.
Oh,
and in there they did a very good job of convincing me that I was crazy and that all of this stuff was just me being paranoid and getting bad source material and all this stuff. And so when I'd gotten out of that and I got back into the world, so to speak, I just went on this downward spiral of. You've seen the movie The Matrix, right?
Yes, it's been a long time, but I've seen it. It's been probably 15 years since I last watched it.
I tried to be Cypher. I tried to untake the red pill and go back into the Matrix. And anytime that the truth started to become impossible to ignore, I would just double down on degeneracy. I would
Yeah.
just dive deeper into, uh, partying and living for the weekend, and just do a different drug next weekend than I did this weekend. Just run from the truth. It was
Yeah.
basically the motto of my early 20s. And you can't.
You can't do it.
You can't
There's no
yeah, you
escaping.
can't. Yeah, there isn't. Like, and see, like, my thinking was that if I just be degenerate enough, I'll have no choice but to stay in the matrix, because the people who know the truth are typically so puritanical and unforgiving that when they're aware of how much of a degenerate you've been, they won't accept you back.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like, a lot of the puritanical rhetoric that you see on Twitter or Gab or wherever, like when you hear these people go on these like rants about blah 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 degenerates, blah 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 gas, blah 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 blah, they're just saying that because they're mad.
Yeah.
they're they're not saying what they really mean. As soon as you like come back to the light, they're just going to give you a big hug
Yeah.
and say that they're glad to have you there.
Yeah.
And so, in the off chance that anybody is making the same mistakes that I was making, and they see this, it's all right. Like, we're not gonna romper stomp you.
Yeah. What you just said there, that mirrors my personal experience. I started my YouTube channel just a little over 2 years ago. And over the last year, I've met 9 different people from across the country. And I've talked to a lot more of our guys online. And you wouldn't believe how many of them's story is somewhat similar to ours. They've had their struggles with drugs.
It's
And
because they hit that period of just absolute hopelessness, and they didn't know how to cope. And in our society, like, if you look at like the movies that came out when we were growing up, and just like the whole culture was around like, well, when you're hopeless, like, this is what you do. And so it's
yes,
like, well, I'm hopeless, so I'll guess I'll do that because that's what the TV says I'm supposed to do when I'm hopeless.
yeah,
uh so yeah,
it's
sorry, I didn't mean to
promoted.
cut you off.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Don't worry about that. Yeah, I was going to say drug abuse is just so promoted to young people,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean it's subliminally, it's subconsciously promoted in a lot of ways. Um, like I said earlier, I'd gotten into OxyContin there for. It started when I'd never touched a drug in my life until I went to college. I got drunk a
Mm-hmm.
couple of times in high school. I played football and baseball. I made really good grades. And that's how I ended up in college. I had scholarships and stuff, academic and such. But once I got to college, I didn't have any sports to play. And I'm just like,
Mm.
well, I'm more interested in chasing women now. And, chasing women led to me, drinking a lot more often. I smoked some weed. I don't think anything's wrong with smoking weed necessarily. I don't do it anymore. But one thing led to another. A year later, I'm snorting Lortabs and OxyContin, and I kept it under wraps for several years. I kept it hidden from my family. I always worked. I wasn't strung out too bad or anything. It was a weekend thing, I guess you could say. But when I
Mm-hmm.
got out of college and was able to work full time, and I didn't have deadlines to meet per se, and a lot of pressure on me, started getting into the OxyContin much more often. I started meeting people, around town. Like I said, I had family that went down to Florida, brings back a ton of pills. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I managed to get off of that shit back in about 2014, and I
Proud of you
just
for
smoked.
that. That's awesome too.
Yeah, it was. I didn't feel good there for about a week or two. withdrawal and such. I got off of it, but then during 2015, I just smoked some weed and occasionally drink and work. 2016, I discovered crystal meth, and that was just an absolute train wreck in itself. And I did it really hard for about 2.5 years. That's when I got into doing robbery, and there for a short period of time, I actually ended up homeless, which was deserved. It was absolutely deserved. It was a real catastrophe, you could say. I'm extremely lucky that I managed to get away from it all, because if I hadn't have moved down here with my fiance at the time, she stayed with me all. We've been together for over 10 years now. She stayed with me through. Yeah, she stayed with me through all of this. She never was into anything like this, thank God. And I would back when I was into the meth and such, I would disappear for 2, 3, 4 days at a time, because I didn't want to be around her when I was high, because we would argue, and she'd be mad. And she got a job down here where we live currently, and she basically gave me the ultimatum. She's like, I know you've got your own house and land up here, but you can either come with me or I'm just going to leave you. I can't do this no more. And I decided, I was like, yeah, this is, because if I hadn't have done that, I'm absolutely certain I would be in prison or dead. I got into some dangerous situations a couple of times. And it's this was like a different animal, I guess you could say.
Yeah, because it's an upper, not a downer.
Yeah, I'd stay up 5, 6 days. I got down to 100. Yeah, I can't believe she stayed with me.
Good for her for having the strength to give you that ultimatum. Good for you for making the right choice.
Yeah.
Proud of you. I've seen other people make the wrong choice and just destroy themselves.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a trend in your description of like how you started spiraling down, and I've noticed it amongst other people, including myself. It's that when you found yourself in a situation where you didn't really have a reason not to do it. It's like when you were in college, you had deadlines to meet, you had like things to get done.
Commitments, real commitments.
Yeah, you had real commitments. So you had a reason not to do it until the weekend got here, right? But once you found yourself in a situation where you didn't have a reason not to do it, so it became a might as well, and then it went from might as well to a habit, and then it went from a habit to a bad habit, and then it went to a dependency, and it just rolls down the hill like that.
Yeah.
I don't believe in like drugs are bad. I think that drugs are tools. And a tool has good uses and a tool has bad uses. If you've broken your femur in 6 places, Oxycontin's pretty awesome and you should probably use it.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you have unresolved like psychological issues or are just bored, that's not a good use for Oxycontin.
No, absolutely not.
Like, it's like there are these studies that are coming out of Europe where a lot of like universities and different medical research groups are experimenting with things like psilocybin mushrooms, and they've had like an 80% success rate in getting people to quit smoking cigarettes, which is something that I still have yet to do.
Man, I need to quit myself, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I've cut back.
I limit myself to half a pack a day at most. Like if I ever find myself smoking 10 cigarettes in a single day, I'll cut myself down. But people are so damned annoying that I feel like it's just unreasonable of you to expect me to quit. But anyway, they've had an 80% success rate in getting people to quit smoking with psilocybin mushroom
interesting
use in a
clinical setting.
What's the word? Yeah, in a clinical setting. The weird thing is that you have to have a spiritual experience or it doesn't work. It can't be purely clinical. It has to be spiritual. and as somebody who's experimented with psilocybin mushrooms,
I have too.
I can attest.
It's interesting.
It is. Another one is they've had a high rate of success curing, not treating, not reducing severity, outright curing post-traumatic stress disorder with MDMA. And that's something that Jordan Peterson has talked about. And that's how I found out about it. And I started digging into the research on it. And that research was very easily available to me because I had access to academic search engines.
Yeah.
Tying back to the like positive resources of going to university. So like I don't believe like drugs are bad. Okay. That being said, when it comes to marijuana is a plant. Okay,
Yeah.
it grows like that. It has its uses. These dab pen things need to go. Like those things need to go because like they turn people into freaking zombies. Like you don't.
It's so
you don't
concentrated.
Need,
It's so
right.
concentrated. It's pure THC practically.
Exactly.
Jesus.
Exactly. You're basically, it's as if you stuck horse tranquilizer in an asthma inhaler and just started going, like, no, that stuff needs to go. Like, I was pulling, there was this guy that got hired on where I work. I work in a crummy corporate retail job.
You hold on for 1 second. My dog's. I'm going to shut this door here. My fiance just walked outside. I can hear my dog barking, and I could hear it echo. Give me just 1 second. Sorry, man.
Yeah, take your time. You're good.
Loki.
Your dog's name is Loki. Your dog's name is Loki? Oh, you don't have your headphones on. You can't hear me.
Yeah, his name is Loki. I actually heard you.
Oh, okay. I have a cat. Her name is Astartes.
Oh wow!
If you're familiar with Warhammer 40,000.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. I played
Dude,
that a handful of times when I was a child or younger.
If you're ever in Savannah, Georgia, the nerd circle in Savannah, Georgia, Warhammer figurines are same as cat.
Really?
Like, yeah, like I had an old roommate that I was having trouble finding a job and I owed him rent, so I literally just paid him in Ultramarines.
Wow!
I literally paid my rent in Ultramarines.
That's crazy.
But anyway, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, dab pens and how they
yes.
So there was this guy that we had hired him on, and he worked there for only a few weeks. This dude was so zonked out that I don't think he knew where he was half. He was like from a Cheech and Chong movie. And I was like, dude, stop it. Every time you hit that thing, it's like smoking half a bowl to yourself in just one puff of the thing. Stop doing that. Right. Because see, here's the thing. If you're gonna tell me that, like, you know, something, it's all natural. Something, it's a plant. It just grows like that. Like, that's cool. Like, you know, whatever. I accept your naturalist argument. But when you take it and then you pulverize it into a paste, and you strip the THC out with kerosene, and you infuse it into a wax or an oil, like you're not smoking a plant anymore.
It's extremely manipulated.
Right, you're just straight up doing drugs. Right. It's like the difference between if you were to go to South America and rip a coca leaf off of the plant and start chewing it because it gives you energy.
Yeah.
I don't have much of an issue with you doing that. Mm-mm. But when you take those leaves and you put them in a big pile and you throw battery acid on them and you start stripping it out, and then you take that in powdered form and shove it up your nose, now I've got a problem with it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's extremely.
Yeah. That's my feelings on it. And I've had
Yeah.
people tell me that that's just the naturalist fallacy, and I'm just like, I'm not concerned if it's a logical fallacy or not, because
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever lived life before, but life isn't very logical. So
That's
there are
true.
some things where there are some situations where you kind of have to feel your way through things. And that was like the most important lesson that my ex ever taught me. But anyway, uh,
Yeah. Hell, I didn't necessarily mean for us to get off on this drug rant per se, but that's
oh
interesting. You
yeah,
spoke about this. I'm also glad that you're here, and yeah, our journey was a little different. You were awake, aware of these things, and
and I was
you were
trying to
trying
go
to
to sleep.
retreat. You were trying to
Hmm.
retreat. I'll look at mine. I wasn't so much aware. That's one thing, unfortunate, I guess you could say. Here in rural Appalachia and largely white areas, a lot of people here are extremely deracinated. And I've thought before, talking about some of the projects like what you have done or what you've got going on. A while back, me and Patrick Siegeman, survived from Surviving by America. He's also an
Yeah,
Appalachian. And me and him came up with the idea, and I'm wanting to try to do this. It's something, it's interesting you showed me those little pamphlets, those chick books. I have thought about going back to my hometown and like one morning going and stopping in Johnson City, buying a bunch of Chick-fil-A biscuits, buying a ton of them, and just posting up in a park in the little supermarket parking lot back home, hand out chicken biscuits in the morning and hand out a little flyer. And this flyer, what I was going to say is like, did you know that there is a war on white people? You know, try to get people more racially aware. And I was going to mention
mhm.
something in that pamphlet uh, about the opiate crisis, how it is focused towards the white rural population. That's why you see, and this would I think hit home with a lot of people because I mean it's shocking at how much damage the drugs have done in these rural parts. And I mean, it's not just Appalachia; it's where you are. It's in the Midwest.
Mhm.
It's definitely up in New England, Maine, elsewhere. It's. I think that's one thing. Doing like charitable work. I think we need an organization to do some like charitable work. For white families for and that's another idea I've had. I've thought about going to narcotics. See, I've never made it to rehab or anything or went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, but I would like to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting and sometimes talk and maybe sometime, in the future. I don't really know where to start with this. I'm not someone that can just snap his finger. I don't see myself being good at running an organization, but I would like to try to start something to help the young white people who are on these
Some kind
drugs
of
and
community
everything.
outreach.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because a lot of people like who are in those positions, they find themselves there because they feel like no one really cares about them. They feel like there's nothing to care about. That's nihilism is probably the biggest threat to our souls.
Yes.
It's crushing our people. And when it comes to like trying to start nonprofits, like I've looked into that. I've looked into it a lot.
Yes.
And you run into the issue of once you've got an organization that exists as a legal entity on paper, you're going to get lawfared into the ground if you're explicitly trying to help white people
Yeah.
specifically.
You'd have to be subtle
So
with it, I
yeah,
guess
you
you could
have to
say.
be subtle with it. You can't be explicitly pro-white. You have to just kind of limit yourself to a geographical area that's pretty much exclusively white. Um,
See, that's what
but
that's I was going to say that's what appeals to me and Pat is, just the geographical area of, southern and central Appalachia. We could, and this sort of process could easily be replicated in other parts of the country. It couldn't.
mhm.
I would never see anything like this ever getting big, but something to just give people a little hope, and maybe you know foster a little sense of pride in them. Back when I was into drugs and everything, I had no real self pride. I hated myself a lot of times back then. I mean, I knew what I was poisoning myself. I knew what I was doing is not how you're supposed to live. You know,
Mhm.
but you also
So,
have to realize too, I believe, you also have to realize that the people you are trying to help, they have to help themselves, of course.
right.
You
And
can't do it
you
all
want
for them.
to, and remember, what I was talking about, like you need a reason to not do it.
Yes.
So, rope them into, like, ideally what you'd want to do is, like you said, go out there with the Chick-fil-A biscuit, establish a rapport with these people, and then set them to task. Like, find a way of easily contacting them, save up some money, and then go to Lowe's. Go to Lowe's or Home Depot or someplace. Get some asphalt patch kits. All right. Load them up in your car or truck or whatever it is that you got. Then go pick up those guys and go like, okay, guys, today we're going to go out. We're going to find potholes and we're going to fix them.
Wow, that's a brilliant idea. That's a really
Like,
brilliant idea, actually.
because like then you're helping out the community on an infrastructure level, and you're helping out these people because you're giving them something to do, right? Look around town, look around the neighborhood, look for somebody who's got some shingles blown off on their roof, and say, okay, guys, we're gonna go fix this. Something to do with their hands that they can see with their eyes. Like, look at how you're making the world better.
Yeah.
And there's this strategy that a lot of like left wing activist groups use where they'll fill a niche in a local community of doing something like patching potholes or certain things like that the city would have to allocate, or the city or the county or whatever municipality you're in, they would have to allocate a certain amount of their budget towards doing that, right?
Yes.
And then you start doing that for them, and they can then divert that funding to other things. Okay.
Yes.
You then, once that kind of paradigm has been established, you then get to go into the city council meetings, and now you have pull because you can stop doing that stuff, and then they have to start spending money on it again.
That's
And
interesting. Yes.
that gives you a little bit of leverage.
Yeah.
See, all I do is think about stuff. And this is actually, like, I'm going to go ahead and reveal my biggest character flaw. I suck at doing things. I am great at coming up with ideas. I am an idea guy. I swear, if you stick me in a think tank, I've got a never-ending supply of movie ideas, show ideas, uh, infrastructure ideas, political ideas. I've got ideas, 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 ideas. But when it comes to doing them, I'm not great at that.
I'm
I
gonna
I've found that my best talent is finding other people. I'll come up with an idea and I'll go, okay, now I need to find somebody who can actually do this. And then I'll find that person and I'll be like, okay, here's the idea, go do it. And it always works out better that way. Uh, I make a much better Merlin than I do an Arthur, basically.
Hey, it's all we all have our talents. We all have our skills. You're extremely intelligent, so the think tank, that's a perfect place for you. And like you said, would you like to talk a little bit about your project that you had spoken about last year with our friend Pat?
Yeah, lead. So the concept, for anyone unfamiliar, which you probably are, it wasn't very well marketed, was life exists after doxing. The idea was that if you or someone you cared about had incurred some kind of damages or were facing some kind of danger as a result of being doxxed, you could go to lifeexistsafterdoxing.com. The website's still there, and reach out to me, and I would do the best I could to find a way to help you. If your home had been compromised and you were facing some kind of threat, I still have my contact with a chain of extended stay hotels. Might not be the best option. You might have to move farther than you wanted to, but it would be something to just cover cover yourself while you try and figure out what the next stage of your life is. And my goal was to kind of weave together a network of based businesses, essentially. And if there were any gaps in the business network as people were doxxed and kicked out of the mainstream economy, we could just start building a parallel economy based on what talents and skills those people had. Gab is doing a much better job of the parallel economics thing than I ever could have. There's a lot of based businesses for you to connect with on Gab. No one except for one person reached out for help, and the person who reached out for help was in a different country, and they had problems that I could not help them. But the people who donated, I refunded their money because I'm not gonna. I had no intention of. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about taking anybody's money. That's not the goal. I'm the kind of asshole who majors in philosophy. Money is not what motivates me. And if I wanted to grift, I would just go over to the left and be like, I'm a reformed neon Yahtzee, guys. Like, I've seen the light. Give me microphones and cameras.
Caleb Kane guy. Was that what his name was? Caleb Kane, that came out a couple of years ago and said he fell down the alt-right rabbit hole.
Yeah, rabbit hole. Yeah. I remember that guy. Screw that guy. He's a prick.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's a faggot.
But yeah, I made some good connections and I learned a lot of important lessons. But other than that, it didn't really go anywhere. But the website's still there, and if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can. But honestly, like, because when I got doxxed, nothing happened.
Yeah.
Like, nothing happened. And I was kind of like trying to make something happen. Like, at one point, an Antifa guy on Twitter was like, well, we know who you really are. And I was like, dude, I published my presentation under my name. Like, I know you know who I am. What are you threatening me with? Yeah. And some guy, a different Antifa account at one point, like, actually threatened me. And so I sent him my location data. I was just like, here I am, dude.
Come on down. Come on down.
Yeah, come on down. There were some Antifa goons at my school, like at Georgia Southern University, and you're not allowed to smoke on campus. So there was this one spot where everyone who smoked would hide to, like, get in a cigarette in between classes.
Yeah.
And that's where I met these guys. And I was like hanging out with them on a daily basis, having conversations with them, having political discussions and even debates with them. And I just never, sorry about that. I just never named the, I guess, ideological corner that I was in. I just said, here are my ideas. And they're just like, oh, well, that's kind of a good idea, but I think it would be better this way. And like, I had productive conversations with them. And then after my presentation came out, they wouldn't talk to me. And I was expecting them to get kind of gangster, but they never did. They never did. They wouldn't even look at me.
I would say they were shocked that they agreed with you previously on a lot of the points that you brought up, and then they find out what you were, how you thought, what you see. It horrified them.
Yeah, I think that did have a big effect, but like, I was seriously expecting some kind of like confrontation out of them. But it was literally like, I would be walking down the hallway and they would see me and they would look at the ground and they would just walk past. Like, these people are all balls and no shaft. Okay. Like, do not be afraid of these people. And one of the most important lessons that had taught me was that if you're not hiding, they can't expose you. If
That is
you're
true.
not running, if you're not running, they can't chase you. When you just stand there and say, "My name is Charles Allen Robertson. I am a white man. I am not ashamed. I am in fact proud to be a white man. I am proud of the accomplishments of my ancestors. I'm proud of this world that we live in today. I am kind of ashamed of how it's deteriorating. And I'm a little bit disappointed in my people for letting it get this bad. But I'm not apologizing. I'm not ashamed. Come at me."
Come on
They
down.
got nothing.
Tell
Yeah,
them to
come on down.
Come on down. 50 cent
And
pound.
yeah, it's my contemporary philosophy professor. All right, he had like an autographed communist propaganda flyer from
I
somewhere
heard
in
you
Asia.
say that in one of the shows you were
Yeah.
on. I watched.
It was on the wall of his classroom. This guy didn't even have the decency to hide it in his office, right? And during, like, at the end, towards the end of the semester, COVID happened, right? And we were locked down. And I had just been locked in my room for like 2 months. And because I fell for the COVID thing, hook, line, and sinker.
I mean,
I thought
really,
it was like,
a lot of us did. I thought that this was something big potentially that was going to happen.
I thought that it was like a bioweapon that was going to sterilize the population or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so locked in my room, doing class online, communicating with my professor over freaking Google Hangouts.
Yeah.
And the day before I was supposed to read my presentation to the class over Skype, or not presentation, freaking paper. It was just an essay. Like the day before I was supposed to read it, he told me that my sources were crap, that Ron Unz was a hack, and the American Conservative is not a real source, and that I had to throw my paper out and rewrite. I told him that he could fail me if he wanted, but I was turning in my paper. To my shock, this actually earned his respect. And he said, "All right, I admire your disinterest in grades. You can turn in this paper, but you still have to remove half of it because I told you to double space it." And this is one of the best interactions I've ever had with a professor.
I just got a quick question. You made a video about this also, didn't you? It was a paper.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I watched that video a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, it's titled "Reconstructing Whiteness," if anyone's interested in it.
Yes.
So he told me I had to delete half of it because it was supposed to be double spaced. I told him that double spacing was a cop out for people who didn't have anything to say. And then he replied to me, "No, double spacing is a cop out for professors who have to read 120 papers in 4 days." And I was just like, "Oh, okay, you know what? That's actually fair."
Fair point. Valid point.
valid point. But
Yeah.
we each other's respect in that interaction. And he actually gave me a B, which I thought for sure I was going to get like a C- at best. But gave me a B. And I dive into some edgy stuff in that.
I watched the video. I listened to it quite intently. It was very edgy, but I mean, it was all truth. It's all truth.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you can't just go into college and edge post about everything. You've got to dress up your language, and it's like, guys, the left's language. You know the left's language better than most leftists do. You know how to take your ideas and translate them into their weird verbiage so that they can understand you. You know how to cite a source. Go to college, guys. Like, do it. It's ripe and waiting for you. And the reason that you've been psyoped into thinking that this is like a complete waste of time is because long marching through the institution of academia was the single most effective thing the left ever did. And they do not want us to copy that strategy because they know that when the academy is a big box, And when you're in it, you're in it. You can't escape. And they know that if they're locked in that box with you, they're fucked. They're so fucked. They're fucked with a dick an elephant will feel. All right. Go to college. Do it. Do it. What do you have to lose at this point, really?
You know, I've talked about it in the past, and I would say that I would disagree with you there, but you do make an extremely valid point. You know, and I
It
heard
all
you
depends
mention
on what
that.
you major in.
Yeah, I will say this, Charles. I wish I would have went to college and known you in college and been around you. And I wish I would have been a lot smarter because I would have enjoyed and gotten a lot more out of college if someone like you and I was aware of these things and, you know, wasn't so preoccupied with the typical bullshit that most college students are. You know, I would have gotten a lot of joy out of, you know, terrorizing professors and other students, you could say. That would have made it very worthwhile, in my opinion. So
Oh,
yeah, I
dude,
can
I
absolutely understand where you're coming from. I can
I am
understand that.
so mad. I am so mad about COVID putting my academic career on pause because if it hadn't been for COVID, the following semester there was a whole class on the Holocaust.
Oh
There's
wow.
like a whole class just on that singular topic, and I was so gonna take that freaking class, dude.
Oh man.
And I would I would have had such great content for my channel.
You would have. You had years of content probably.
Oh, dude. Uh, and there were other things too. It's like one of the like I don't want to dox any of my professors, which sucks because I really want to tell your audience to buy their books because like some of my professors were just awesome. Like
Yeah.
my history, like I had a professor in my history and archaeology of the biblical world class, right? Uh, he was just excellent. I I actually learned stuff from this guy because like I felt like for most of the time I was there, I was just kind of going over things I had already learned either at the library or on the internet. It was kind of like just reviewing stuff. But then
Yeah.
I got to his class and I actually started to like learn new things about like the way that ancient religions work and the more esoteric nuance of like ancient Babylonian and Mesopotamian mystical practices and
And
stuff.
then
It was
Kabbalah and all that stuff that came later.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and how all of that like trickled out of this origin.
This
And
mystery
it was
Babylon religion or whatever it's called, I believe.
yeah,
Um,
it's so it was just so genuinely interesting and I had a blast. If you like learning stuff, and if
yeah.
you're watching channels like this, you probably do. Like just don't go to a private university. Don't do that. Even if you get accepted to Harvard, don't freaking go. You're gonna get
Yeah.
kicked out in 2 days. Uh, like if you're able to get accepted to Harvard, like badass. Like it looks really good on a resume for you to put down. Yeah, I got accepted to Harvard, but said nah, screw that because they're just douchebags.
Yeah,
Like that's gonna
you could
make
say
your,
if you said that to any Ivy League school, like Princeton or is Cornell also Ivy League, or is
I
it
think so.
or
I think it's
yeah,
like one of the lower rungs
Dartmouth,
of the Ivy League.
Yale, any of
I
those?
know I know that the bottom rung of Ivy League is Brown.
Okay, Brown's
Like you
it's up
can,
in Rhode Island, I believe, isn't
I
it?
think so.
Yeah. Um,
But
what was you going to say? Go ahead.
oh no, I lost my train of thought and was just rambling.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine, man. My life is just one big ramble. I feel like a lot of times. Um, I was going to ask you, and this was one of the videos I think you posted about a month or so ago, and you briefly we were just briefly spoke about religion. You could say you had made what I thought was a very I see the kitty cat there. It's awesome. You had made a video talking about religion, about Christianity. It was a rant, you could say, and and it was talking about this infighting that is occurring in these dissident right spheres, I guess you could say. There's always been this religious debate between the atheists, the pagans, and the Christians. And I thought that video was extremely. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it really put the hook in me. Because myself, I have more of what you would call a pagan worldview. Some pagans would say that I'm an atheistic sort of pagan. I don't necessarily believe that the gods were real figures and such. I think they're represented forces of nature. But at its base, honestly, I just believe in reincarnation. I believe in blood memory. I believe our soul, our spirit, will pass on to our descendants. I don't understand the concept per se of heaven. And I was raised Presbyterian and also on occasion went to a Free Will Baptist church. But anyway, you had said in that video you were raised Baptist, correct?
Very much so.
Yeah, and I liked how you deconstructed it. You were talking about the Groypers and Nick Fuentes' little Tradcath fanboys and such. I was going to ask you what, and you brought up something at the end of, or actually in the follow up video, you were saying that we kind of need something new. We need, I guess you could say, in a way, we need a new religion, for our people, I guess you could say. What do you consider yourself per se? Do you consider yourself agnostic, or I don't think you consider yourself atheist.
Definitely not.
Yeah, I liked how you put it. Atheism is a dead end, and that's how I feel about atheism.
Honestly, I don't think that. Okay, so this is gonna start getting really weird really fast, but I don't think atheists really exist. Because like this is a cup. Okay. If we all together like stopped calling it a cup and we started calling it glass, which a lot of people call it a glass, even though it's not made of glass, but it doesn't, what we call it doesn't make it stop being what it is. Okay? Like, it is what it is, and that is that. The word that we use to communicate the concept of the thing has no effect on what the thing actually is. It only affects our interpretation of what the thing is. Because of that, like, when someone says they're an atheist, they'll typically say, like, well, I don't believe in God. And I'm like, okay, do you believe that war exists? And they'll say, well, yes, obviously. And I will say to them, okay, congratulations. That's one God you believe in. You're not an atheist.
That's a good point. That's a really good.
And it actually worked. It worked out perfectly in my religious studies class because atheist girl said, I'm an atheist. And I said, there's no such thing as atheist. He said, I don't believe in God. And I said, does war exist? He said, yes. There's a God you believe in. Congratulations, you're not an atheist. She then said, war is not a God. Who says war is a God? And I replied, all of humanity for thousands of years.
I was going to ask you real quick. Have you ever read a book called Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy? He's the same
Blood
guy
Meridian?
Yeah, it's called Blood Meridian. I'd recommend that book to you. It's an extremely it's probably, in my opinion, I believe it is the best work of fiction that has been written by a contemporary author in the United States within the last 100 years. And Cormac McCarthy, do you remember the movie No Country for Old Men?
I never saw it, but
that's a good
heard
movie.
A lot of hype about it.
Yeah, and I think it won a bunch of awards in 2007 when it was released. Cormac McCarthy wrote the book that movie is based off of. But yeah, if you've got some free time, I would check out that book, Blood Meridian. It's
Blood Meridian. I'll look into that. So what's Abstract.
It is a Western. It's set back in the 1850s. It's a Western. There's three main characters in it. This is based off of historical people. You could call it, I guess, a work of historical fiction. The main character is the kid, the protagonist. He's called the Kid. He is a 14-year-old boy from Tennessee who leaves his family and heads out. He heads down to Texas at the beginning of the book. And he meets the antagonist of the book, a guy by the name of Judge Holden. And he is this sort of supernatural, you could call him a demon in a way. He never ages. He's almost 7 foot tall. He's white, blue eyed. He's bald headed. He doesn't have a single hair on his body. But he's very intelligent. And he's I think he's one of the greatest antagonists possibly ever. And then the third character is a guy by the name of John Glanton. He was a real historical figure, and they were scalp hunters. They went out west, killed Indians, killed the natives, collected bounties. And as the story goes on, it's an extremely visceral and violent novel. But in it, the judge, he gives a lot of very interesting monologues. And one of the most important monologues he gives, he's talking about war is God. He said that's the business we're all in. And that just made me think about what you were talking about, how atheists, and you ask them if, well, there's no such thing as an atheist, and they respond, yeah, I'm one. And then you said, well, do you believe in war? That just, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on this tangent, but
no, you're good.
That came
I
into
can
my
see
mind.
how you made that. Yeah. I see how that connection shows up there. But it's like I made a video titled Thoughts on God, in which I kind of break this down a bit. But there are these things that they exist, but they don't have mass. And they are not energy. Like hippies always talk about energy. But they exist wherever it is that thoughts exist. And they're real. They were real before you were born. They were real before mankind existed. Like violence. Violence is a real thing. It affects reality. Reality bends to the fact that violence is a real thing.
Yeah.
Life can't exist without violence. Every breath you take is an act of violence, because thousands, if not millions, of organisms are fighting, killing, and dying in a never-ending struggle for survival. And that happens every time you breathe. Like peace is in many ways an illusion if you look at the world that way.
Yeah.
And but the atheists, they don't use the word God to describe war, or violence. They'll say it's a concept, it's an archetypal experience, or they'll use some kind of like Jungian psychological term to describe it. But what you call it doesn't change what it is. And it only changes the way that you interpret the thing. And when you build like a language system for describing concepts, like psychology does, or like mystical practices, they form their own terminology. And these are different systems for interpreting the same thing. And I'll give you an analogy using mathematics, right? If we're using fractions and I divide 1 into thirds, I have 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. And if I add those 3/3 back together, I get 1 again. But if I use decimals and I take the number 1 and I divide it into thirds, I have 0.3 repeating, 0.3 repeating, and 0.3 repeating. And when I add those back together, I get 0.9 repeating, which, in mathematics, they'll tell you just round that to 1. But no. Like you're correcting for an error that emerges out of this counting system. Like this system is flawed in that, like, you take the thing, you divide the thing in order to understand its parts, but then taking those understood parts and putting them back together, you've lost the whole of the thing. But with this other counting system, you get the whole back when you add it together, but you get a much less precise understanding of the parts as you've divided it. There, and that's easy to understand talking about numbers, but when you start trying to explain that to people when talking about things like the non-material components of reality, it starts getting way too heady for most people. It's not something that people can really grasp. And I think that that's kind of what happened with religion. It's like, have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
It's been a very long time, but yes, I've seen it.
Okay. So do you remember that part where Joe gives up and just tells them that he can talk to plants, and the plants said that they wanted water?
Yeah, I recall
Right?
that.
Because, like, yeah, he's trying to explain to them that, like, the plants need water, not Brondo. But they're so trapped in their little, like, circular reasoning of their verbiage, because they've defined electrolytes as what plants crave. So, like, they can't escape that, because they're just trapped by their limitation of words and their limited understanding. So he just gives up and tells them he can talk to plants. I think that a long time ago there were these brilliant thinkers who understood there's this non-material element of reality, and they created a system of quantifying and communicating these ideas, and that system was these parables and metaphors and fables and stories. And then they tried to explain it to people who weren't as intelligent as them, and they just didn't get it. They're just like, and they would explain that this is the story and this is why you need to do good things and be a good person. And they're just like, so there's this, like, super powerful figure that if I engage in violence incorrectly, he's going to punish me for that. And they're just like, no, not exactly. It's a metaphor. We're trying to analogize that to how this works in life. And they're just like, oh, so you're just making it up. Like, no, I'm not making it up. I figured it out. Oh, so the guy is real. Well, no, but yes, and then they just give up and tell them there's invisible fucking people in the sky that are going to do bad shit to you if you don't fly right. I think that that's pretty much what happened. And another issue is that I think that a lot of the ancient mysteries got lost because there were these things. You don't teach monkeys how to make fire. You don't teach monkeys how to make fire because they're probably not going to understand anything you try to teach them. And anything that they do understand, they're not going to do anything with that information except hurt themselves and probably everything around. So when you find this, like, fire kind of information, you keep that a secret. And you only teach that secret to people who can handle it. And then the frickin' Persians show up and kill all of you, and your secret is lost, and all that's left is these stories you wrote down. And then people don't know how to interpret those stories. It's like in the Greek creation myth, right? You've got Cronus and Gaia, and they, have babies, and the babies are the gods, and Cronus eats each one of them until Zeus is born, and Gaia hides Zeus so that Cronus can't eat him, and then Zeus grows up and kills Cronus, and all the gods spring out of Cronus after he's been defeated. And that story just sounds like straight up schizo posting if you don't know how to actually interpret the myth.
Yeah.
Right. Because Gaia is nature, and nature is chaos, and Cronus is time. So out of chaos, like, you have chaos, right? Just the primordial chaos where anything could be. And my headphones are about to die. But so if I lose you for a second, that's what happens.
Okay.
nature is like chaos is the thing where everything and nothing is. It's chaos. Anything could happen. And then you have time. Out of chaos over time, order, various states of order will inevitably emerge out of the chaos. But each of those states of order is consumed by time. Time devours all things except the cosmic authority, the order of order. And that's what Zeus is, the king of the gods, the cosmic authority. And can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. One of my headphones has died. Weird.
I was about to say,
anyway,
how much longer do you have? I mean, do you need to charge them, or would we need to end the stream, or?
Let me adjust my audio settings here and see what I can do.
I was about to say we've been going for an hour and 30 minutes. I'm willing to go for a little over 2 hours if you wanted to. You know, I just didn't, or if you needed to.
I think I'll finish up this point and then we can probably call it, because now that I'm out of my train of thought, I'm noticing that I'm actually really hungry.
I know, me too.
But anyway, so I'll just wrap this up. So time devours all things except the cosmic authority. By nature of the cosmic authority, it cannot be devoured by time because it is timeless. It transcends time. So Gaia, nature, hides Zeus away. And then Zeus comes back and defeats time. And because this cosmic authority transcends time, all of those other states of order reemerge after having been devoured by time. And that's like a cyclical thing. When you have an infinite chaos, everything that can exist will emerge out of it and will reemerge out of it after it's been devoured by time. So what seems like just straight up schizo posting is actually a really profound philosophical idea that's being communicated extremely well if you know how to interpret the myth. And that's where my issues with Christianity really lie. In that when you just interpret the book of Genesis, you find yourself learning lessons that I fundamentally disagree with. Like, man is created as a perfect being. False. Man performed an act which caused him to fall from grace and no longer be a perfect being. Well, we've already established that man was not created as a perfect being, so that is also false.
Yeah.
But the act that man committed, which caused him to fall, was learning a new thing. He ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Like, he learned morality, and that caused him to become flawed. I fundamentally disagree with every lesson that's being learned here. And then after that, God curses man, that he's cursed to work by the sweat of his brow. And I just reject the idea that work is a curse.
Yeah.
I think that work is an opportunity. There's so much of a cynical worldview. There's so much romanticization of ignorance. The way that the promises that the serpent makes to Eve are all of the same promises that every priest of every religion makes to their potential followers.
Yeah, you pointed that out in that video.
So like there's just, and the thing about it is that when you find yourself where I'm at, where I simply can't accept the foundations of the origin myth in the book of Genesis, the entire rest of the thought train becomes irrelevant to me, because you may have the most beautiful house ever built, but it's built on a foundation of sand. It's not going to stand. And that's apparent if you look at the behavior of Abrahamic religion throughout history. It has to murder its dissenters or it doesn't survive. And this has been true since the book of freaking Leviticus. Because it isn't there. There's good stuff in it. The story of David and Goliath, great story.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stories and tales in it.
Oh yeah, and it's not that it's without wisdom. Like there's wisdom.
Yeah, there is wisdom. I don't discount.
You have to. Yeah. It's just. It's kind of like diamond mining.
Yes.
It's like, oh, we've got a really good gem of wisdom here, but it's surrounded by all of this random rock crap that we have to knock off of it.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to what you said a second ago about the curse of work, we don't look at that as a curse necessarily. Work is, if it's something you enjoy, it's absolutely not work. And, but look at the people that, all these Abrahamic faiths have sprung from. Those kind of people, they don't really like work. They like to
they like to make other people work on their behalf. And there's this. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were actually talking to me about how it doesn't really the Bible doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I told them, if you take into account that the things you are reading were written by the people who are 40% more likely to develop paranoid schizophrenia than any other group of people on the planet, once you have that piece of information, this suddenly actually starts making a lot of sense. Like how a dude heard a voice that told him if he mutilates his genitals and the genitals of all of his children, he'll be blessed with all the lands of Canaan forever. Here's the thing. I actually am not going to deny that something was talking to that guy. I won't go for the low blow of saying he's just a schizo. Let's say there really was a supernatural entity speaking to him. If there was such an entity, I highly doubt that it is the creator of the universe. Like, I would actually just outright deny that it is the creator of the universe. And I would also highly doubt that it is an entity that you would want to devote yourself to. I don't like to make moral judgments about gods. I see lots of people say things like, Moloch is an evil god. I don't like to do that because these gods, if the real thing that actually exists in the non-material realm of reality, I call it the immaterium because of Warhammer 40,000, and I feel like that's just the most useful term to describe it.
Yeah.
These things that exist in the immaterium, they exist in a state that is beyond our ability to ever fully understand. And I think that they are so far above my station that I have absolutely no place at all making any kind of moral judgments about them.
Yeah.
So I would never make any kind of moral judgment about Moloch. I would only say I would not devote myself to that entity, and I would strongly advise you to also not do that.
Yes. What you were talking here and how you mentioned Warhammer too. There was a book that I read many, many years ago. It was shortly after I got out of college. It's a book called Insomnia, and it's by Stephen King. When I was in high school, I read a lot of Stephen King books. I don't care for the guy. I don't care for his opinions, but I thought he wrote some decent works of, horror and such. And there's a book called Insomnia, and it talks about this, how you called it the immaterium. these different planes of existence. It's a very interesting book. I don't want to get into describing it too much, but how you also brought up about Moloch and such. It reminded me of a lot of. Have you read much of H.P. Lovecraft before?
Oh, I love Lovecraft.
I love him,
like,
absolutely.
Dude, something that I did. There are, if you go on YouTube, you can find the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society's parody Christmas carols.
Really?
Like they made joke Christmas carols that are all about H.P. Lovecraft. I played them on the PA system at my job the entire Christmas season.
That's awesome.
Only like a dozen people or so noticed. Like the most regular customers would notice. But and I love them. I can sing them by heart. Like I've thought about like putting a group together.
I'll have to look
that up.
They're
awesome. You will love them, dude. You will love them.
What's your favorite work of Lovecraft's? Quick question. There's a lot.
I can't remember the name of it. But it's the short story where the guy is lost at sea, and he is just floating around, and that he finds this like lost continent that just kind of poked itself out of the sea for a moment. And there's this like mysterious obelisk looking thing. And he has no idea what he's looking at.
Is it called Dagon?
I think that's it.
It's Dagon, I think is what you're describing. I could be wrong.
Because I spent every freaking sentence of that. It's not a long story. No. I don't even think it's like 3 whole pages. But like every freaking sentence, I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I've got the Barnes and Noble like compendium of like all of his works cram-packed together.
Oh man, nice.
And it's like, dude, if you've got a Barnes and Noble near you, go and pick it up. You can probably order it on Amazon. It's only like $20, and it's a really pretty book. I'd have to like dig through boxes to find it, or I'd show it to you.
Yeah.
But it's a really pretty book, and it's just everything he ever wrote except for the racist poetry.
Yeah, that's a disappointment.
They didn't include that in there for some reason. I mean, like, I don't know why they didn't. And like, I love telling people about Lovecraft. And one of the things I'll do is I'll be telling, and because most people have never heard of him, right? I'll explain to them, like, you have been influenced by Lovecraft. Even though you don't know it, that man is in your head. And he has shaped your perception of what science fiction is. He has shaped your perception of what horror is.
Absolutely. It's this cosmic horror that he...
Yes.
My favorite work of Lovecraft's was... I went on a binge where I read a lot of his work, and Clark Ashton Smith, I believe was his name. Wasn't it Clark Ashton Smith that wrote they kind of worked together. Clark Ashton Smith...
Was he the one who wrote the Necronomicon?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, I know who you're talking about.
But my favorite work of Lovecraft's was At the Mountains of Madness. I really enjoyed that. That's probably my favorite, I would have to say. But there's a lot of different ones, though.
That seems to be everyone's go-to. Like, I also just binged on Lovecraft, and I need to reread that one.
I do,
because
too.
I have none of the details from it in my mind, but it is everyone else's favorite. So I've got to reread. Because I used to do this, this was back in my early 20s. I would stay awake for days at a time, and I would just binge read stuff. And like, I used to binge read in the encyclopedia until I got exhausted. And then I would like binge read Aesop's Fables or H.P. Lovecraft's works or Edgar Allan Poe, which I loved Edgar Allan Poe when I was like a teenager, like 18, 19. Yeah. But now I'm 30 and I read Edgar Allan Poe and I'm like, this is kind of cringe.
Your tastes change over time,
Yeah.
When I look back at some of the stuff by Stephen King that I used to like, I'm kind of just like, it's okay, but
yeah. Like when I was 15, I loved The Dark Half. I like hung on every word of that book. But then I tried to reread it as an adult. I couldn't get past chapter 2. I'm just like, why was I interested in? Yeah, but a book that I like will never get tired of is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Like, I loved The Time Machine.
Yeah.
I felt like it said a lot, that the first thing he did when he found humanity at peace was start a war. Like, because when he shows up, the Eloi are completely at peace.
Yeah.
There's no violence, there's no conflict. Everything that they need is provided for them. Everything that they want is provided for them. They have nothing to want. They're in a state of absolute bliss. And the reason that they're in that state of bliss is because they are cattle.
Yes.
Because that's the only state in nature in which bliss exists, is to be cattle. And
to be taken care of and everything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely domesticated, placated, you know,
it
just
was
absolute complacency.
Yeah, it was so great. I loved The Time Machine. But anyway, I have got to get some food, and
I was about to
also
say,
have to go to the bathroom. So I feel like this is a good place to stop.
Yes.
But it was great talking to you, bro. I hope to talk to you again soon. Like,
yeah, we'll have to do this again soon. There's more questions I was wanting to ask you, but like I said, we've had a great discussion anyway. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on here. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And to anybody in the chat or anyone watching this afterwards, follow me on Gab. I tend to follow people back, but Gab limits your ability to do that. Apparently, my autistic ass acts like a robot, and the algorithm gets confused sometimes and thinks that that's what I am. So, but anyway,
I was going to say
irreplaceable Charles.
Yeah, I was going to say I had put the links to your Gab and and your YouTube channel. I put them in the description box of this stream.
Oh, thanks.
So hopefully it'll help it grow a little bit. You're pretty popular, and I was going to say thank you so much for coming on again, and I hope you have a great evening, Charles. And I really like how you always close out your videos by just saying, "Go outside."
Yeah, don't forget to go outside.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Well, guys, everyone in the chat, thank you so much for coming by. And I hope you all have a great evening, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.